that was Martha. That wasn't my stomach. Is that what you
I
thought?
thought it was your stomach.
From the beans. I'm not doing good today. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome to the Longevity Lab on that note.
Yeah, I'm Juliet, your host.
And I'm Mackie,
Your other host.
the co-host.
The co-host. Yeah, you didn't cook the beans last night.
I realized that living at 5,000 feet, the times that you need to cook certain things are different. So this was the first time I've cooked dehydrated beans, or beans that were not coming out of a can. And you need to cook them longer.
Yeah, they were like
at altitude.
like dry and
Just they were half cooked.
Chili.
That's all.
You made turkey chili over Spanish rice. Very delicious meal. But as I was eating those partially cooked beans, I was thinking,
the flavors were right.
I don't know how this is
but the beans were not.
It's like, I don't know how this is going to go tomorrow when I have to do my training session. And it didn't go well.
Didn't go great.
No. I went to the bathroom like 4 times today.
This is the trouble with trying new things.
Yeah, no, but I think I've done that before. I don't know if it's the partially cooked beans or if it's just chili in general, because I think I made a note, and I got to remember this, like sometimes you have to put your hand in the fire like more than once to not do it again. And I think that I remember having that happen to me a month ago when I had some sort of bean chili thing where the next day I was like, note to self, don't eat chili before you run. It's just not a food for me.
Chili will now be a pre-off day meal.
Yeah, that's like also it's summer. It's not really a great meal.
Yeah. I figured it's not really an issue until next fall now.
Yeah, so that's how I'm doing today. My stomach's slowly recovering from last night's meal, and I had a terrible training session today, but I did it. I stopped like every 15 to 20 minutes, came back, drank water, came back.
You fought your way through it.
The 6 miles took longer than I wanted it to, but I got my 6 miles done. And I feel happy that I did it. I feel like I'm recovering now. I drank a bunch of water. I was able to eat a good lunch. But this is, in training, it's so not a linear thing. I'm really learning this with running in particular, that it's always talked about as you're going to have low moments in racing.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to get through a race that is an endurance race. Like I would say anything more than a half marathon. I think you could probably, all my half marathons, I never really hit a low.
Right.
Actually, that's not true. I think psychologically you can hit a low knowing that you're close to the finish. And I remember in the last half marathon, we got to like mile 11 and I was like, I'm just fucking done. I don't want to, we have to do 2 more miles of this shit. Or I was just like, but that's very psychological, because if you had told me it was a 15-mile race, I thought it probably would have felt like that at mile 13.
Right.
That last mile or two, you're like, God damn, this is taking so long in a way.
I think in the Broad Street Run in Philly, that's a 10-miler. There's a section right, I guess, as you get to the stadiums, which is about a mile from the finish, and you get to the stadiums and you think, oh, we're almost there, we're almost done. But really, it is still another full mile to the finish. And then you hit the entrance to the Navy Yard. Oh, the finish is coming up soon. And then it's still another quarter mile or half a mile, however much it is. And it's always that mental piece of, all right, I have to keep going. But physiologically, you're fine.
Yeah, your mental really is such a big part of your physical, though. Like what you're telling yourself, it translates into your body and the way it feels so much of the time. And I'm so keenly aware of this that, today when I was saying, I feel like shit, and I'm like, telling yourself you feel like shit the whole time is making this a lot worse. And then you're going to start picking up on every little thing that doesn't feel great. Oh, your stomach's, a little off. Oh, my foot feels a little funny. Oh, now it's into my calf. And, your brain and pain are so interconnected, and more research is coming out on this. And it's spectacular, actually, that we're acknowledging the mindset and how it creates your physiology.
Yeah.
Perfect example of this is a podcast Mackie and I were listening to on our plane ride home from Philly. We were both listening to the same one, except you were ahead of me. So I'd be like, oh, do you want to talk about this part? And you're like, I'm already 15 minutes past that part.
I'm already on to the next
God
piece.
damn it. We should have just synced it up more. But Lane Norton, who is a nutritionist, and is that what his PhD is? It's in nutrition, I believe. Pretty sure.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure that is what he went to school for, yeah. But he is a power lifter and nationally ranked, and actually, I think he's gone to worlds, so he's like a world-class power lifter.
Yeah, I think he holds a world record.
Yeah. But he was talking about how for 10 years he dealt with these chronic injuries, and it wasn't until he started working with a evidence-based physical therapist, on like a pain evidence-based physical therapist, that he started to make a comeback. 10 years of trying to make a comeback. It's a long time to be continuing in a sport where you were chronically injured, and just he
Right.
just kept at it little by little. And he was sharing all of this stuff about his mindset and his brain and it creating this pain. And I have had a very similar experience with some chronic things I've had for over 10 years. Like I have this posterior tibialis pain that occurs, and I don't ever feel it on trails. And trails are something that I always feel like I'm having such a fun, amazing time on, and I'm so distracted by the beauty of it. I feel it the most road running, which I have this negative association with. Like road running and me just, I automatically, I'm like, oh, I don't want to have to do road running. And then I start feeling these pains, right? And then sometimes on the treadmill, like today. And what's really interesting about your brain and pain is oftentimes you'll know that it's your brain that's creating this, because it isn't an injury, like a soft tissue injury. It's not like you just had some sort of acute injury, right? I didn't pull anything. It's just, they just pop up randomly, and they are not, you can't really, it's not always the same. Like my right side was always the side that caused me problems. But guess what? Today, it was the left. Weird,
It's
right?
traveling.
It just traveled around to the left. I'm like, and so what that tells me is that I wasn't in a good headspace today. I'm feeling very tired coming off of travel. Stress is accumulated in my body. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think that that's one of the big themes of today's podcast, is how if we stress about something, that is really what we want to
That's
eliminate.
the worst thing that you could
It's
do.
the worst thing you
Yeah.
can do.
Before we
Yeah.
move on,
Are you cutting me off?
I am, only because I want to come back to something. Because you mentioned today, you were saying, oh, I feel like shit. I feel terrible.
Yeah.
What was your mantra yesterday, 24 hours ago?
I'm a fucking champion.
And you felt great.
I mean, yeah, I didn't
You didn't feel good.
No,
That
but
helped you feel
but it
better.
helped me feel better. I decided yesterday, because again, coming off of travel, we're both really tired, changing time zones. We were in Philly for 3 days. We landed on Friday afternoon and we left on Monday afternoon. It was a very quick trip, and it was seeing so many people and doing so many things in the span of just 2 full days that we were there, and doing my training while I was there, getting in my runs. So I think just stress was accumulating. And when we got home and I did that, I have to do a hard run on Tuesdays. Tuesdays is like my speed work, and I also strength train. It's, what we call like a key workout day. It's a day where I'm really trying to push my fitness. And then I have a lot of other days that are like easy, more endurance days. But Tuesdays are like, we're going hard.
Yeah.
And I was feeling not 100%, and it was hot out. But I noticed that negativity. So I was like, I'm a fucking champion. That was like my mantra.
Yeah.
And I was like, instead of always telling ourselves these negative things like, oh, I suck today, I don't feel good, this is bullshit, this is hard, what would it be like to embody that of like a pro athlete, like somebody who has an ego, right? We kind of always diss people who have these egos and like think they're the shit. But then to me, like, why is it okay to be down on ourselves and treat ourselves poorly and say bad things? Why can't we say like we're awesome and we're the shit and we're champions?
It's a lot easier to perform and do whatever you're going to do if you're talking yourself up as opposed to talking yourself down.
It's so foreign to me even to talk myself up, because it almost feels like, who am I to be saying these positive uplifting things about myself. It
Mm,
feels almost like I'm posing as something I'm not when I'm like, "I'm fucking awesome," you know?
right.
But you know what? When I was doing that, it felt really good. Like, it felt like kinda like I was envisioning almost like an MMA fighter about to go into the ring,
Yeah.
and they're just like, "I'm fucking awesome, I'm fucking champion,"
Yeah, the
you know?
walkout song, the hype
Yeah.
music,
I feel
all
like
of that.
you got that with being a collegiate baseball player. Like, they foster that in team sports, and especially I feel like with men, they foster that sort of like, you know, masculine energy of like just knowing that you can do this and that you are incredible and you're about to perform and have the best game of your life,
Yeah. I
right?
mean, I think I got that more so in football. So, we would have a game day playlist that would be playing in the locker room, and everything from the moment that you step foot into the facility till you step onto the field and they've got the hype music going. You're all huddled up in a circle, jumping around, just getting hype, just, just getting ready for the game mentally. And yeah, I mean, that's something that I carry with me through baseball, then, through today.
Yeah, I think that, I was in the dance theater world, and it's very known for you're never good enough. Like, you're
Right.
gonna audition and good luck getting that,
Yeah.
and also, you're just never gonna be as good as so and so, or you have to just always be negative about your performance and it's very self-critical.
One of the interesting things about baseball is that, in my baseball career at my college, we lost more games than we won. And not only that, even the best players in baseball, if you get a hit 3 times out of 10, averaging a 300 batting average, you go to the Hall of Fame. You're among the elite of the elite, right? So there's a lot of failure in baseball, and that's just the way the sport is, even if you are winning games. But one of the things that I took from that experience of losing more games than we won was you still gotta show up tomorrow. You're still gonna show up excited to play. You're gonna do everything the same. You're gonna do everything to get into that mental headspace to win. It's not about the failure yesterday. It's like, okay, that happened. What can we learn from it? And then let's move on and try to do better in the future. As
Yeah.
opposed to this, you're not good enough vibe.
Yeah, the vibe.
Yeah.
The vibes are bad. Well, my vibes were bad today, and but it's okay. I think going back to what I was saying is that you can turn it around so quickly.
Yeah.
You're gonna experience lows with your health and fitness and training.
Mhm.
If you're not experiencing a low, you're probably not trying.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Like, and in a race, especially, it's to be expected that at some point you're gonna feel crappy, and then you're gonna have to figure out how to just work through that, problem solve, and get yourself back. And sometimes you don't come back. There's people who DNF, they do not finish races because that is just not, they're not able to get through for some whatever reason. That doesn't mean that it wasn't an incredible experience and you didn't try. Same thing for workouts. Like, sometimes I've left training sessions, like, "You know what? This session is not doing me any good. I feel too bad. I need to just call it for today, and tomorrow's a new day."
Yeah. But I think the key there is that you showed up.
Yeah.
And that's what I always tell my clients is, even if you're feeling like, I don't know if I'm really into it today. Obviously, if you're sick or if you're injured, and it's clear that it's not going to be a good day, then, don't do it. But if you're kind of on the fence, like I feel physically fine, I'm just not mentally into it. I always say show up, stand on the treadmill, walk for 10 minutes, do something for 10 minutes, do your warm-up routine, do whatever it is that you kind of ease into the session. And then if you still feel bad after 10 minutes, then okay, maybe it's not going to be your day and you can call it then. But at least you did a little something and at least you gave it that shot.
Yeah, and
Because how often do you feel better after 10, 15 minutes and you're like, okay, I feel good now?
I would really give yourself kudos for showing up anyways. To me,
Exactly.
that is the mental fortitude. That is that is being a champion in life. That's why I was screaming I'm a fucking champion yesterday,
Yeah, you
because I
showed up.
felt horrible and I was still doing it. I was like, all right, I have these 8 intervals. I might throw up in the woods over here. And I had a moment of like, if I do throw up, it's part of the experience. So many people who try to do great things throw up in the woods.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if we try to avoid discomfort at all costs, we'll never really see what our full potential is. And so obviously with being safe, we don't want to be like David Goggins running on a broken leg. I think that that's going a little too far,
Yeah, it's an
right?
extreme in the opposite direction for
But,
sure.
not feeling 100% is not a reason to just not try at all. So if we were always waiting for the perfect time for everything, it's like this is a metaphor for life. If you wait for everything to be perfectly set up or you feel perfect or perfect conditions, then you're never going to really start. You're never going to give yourself a chance of doing anything.
Yeah.
I mean, with our business, this is something that took us a while to get over because it's so easy to fall in that trap of we need to have all our ducks in a row. We need to have this podcast perfect. We need to, have the perfect topic, the right marketing. And like, honestly, what is the right thing? It's like always ever changing.
Mm-hmm.
If we waited to be perfect, we would just never have any success. And when we sort of let go of that, we've just been slowly but surely building everything up and
Yeah.
just like letting ourselves do it.
Yeah, it's tough to start something new because you always you know that it can be a little bit better. And that's sort of that perfectionistic mentality that, a lot of us have. It's like, okay, I know I could do it better, but how much longer is that going to take me to get to that point? Whereas being able to put something out, get some feedback from it from people that aren't your own brain, maybe there's things that people love about it that you didn't even realize that you wouldn't have come up with on your own. And then you iterate from there and you can get better and you can improve based off of feedback from other people, which is much more important and much more valuable than just trying to, oh, let's start over. Let's redo this episode.
We're emulating other people, I think.
Yeah.
That's a big thing is if you're always looking to emulate other people who are successful in their own right, you're not them.
Yeah.
I was talking to my client earlier and she was saying it has nothing to do with the program and the workout itself. Which is like I kind of wish it did, but really at the end of the day, the reason that I'm choosing to work with you is because I like you. And I'm like, that's it right there. It's who do you vibe with? Who do you click with?
Yeah.
Sadly, and this is a good segue into, what today's topic is, a lot of people are choosing their fitness gurus and their, influencers in nutrition and health based on who's delivering the best, flashiest storyline and who do they like the most,
right?
Not necessarily based on the data and what's rooted in reality.
Yeah.
So that is the theme of today is like, how do we discern who we can trust and who do we know whose information is accurate out there when the internet is just a sea of misinformation and good information? It's both.
There's lots of good information out there. There's lots of half-truth information.
Yeah.
Or information that's based off of something and then they took this step and then they took this giant leap to come to this conclusion. And it is based on a truth, but how much is that conclusion actually real? So there's so many different things out there and it's so hard to discern what's the reality that's going to help me get to my goals. And that's at the end of the day what we're trying to find.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you want to kind of jump into this topic, Mackie?
There's so many places. I mean, one of the reasons that we wanted to get into this was the controversy around AG1, controversy around Spring Energy, some of these different supplements. But then there's also something that we've been looking at a lot is, just because we're inundated with it, is the prevalence of like these health influencers. And what is the DNA that all kind of brings them together? And how do you understand if you see somebody that comes across your feed? Over the weekend, my dad brought up somebody who came up into his YouTube short feed, and it just so happened to be somebody that I've been looking at and have been, seeing lots of ways that they're being deceitful and kind of tricking people into buying their supplements. So it just so happened that he found that one. That's the perfect example of, somebody who's been in this world for so long. My dad's been, paying attention to this world for so long, and it's so easy to say, like, oh, I like what they're saying. Let me do what they're doing. Let me buy this supplement. Let me try this out.
Well,
And
I was
it's,
saying, like, over the years, because your dad is someone that is very health conscious and he wants to find the hacks that are going to help him
yeah,
live longer and healthier and happier. And so he's always been interested in, are there any supplements or ways that he can live his life that are going to align with that? And we've seen him do all different types of diets throughout the years.
yeah,
We've seen all of his supplement purchases throughout the year. And something I brought up to you was just, how much money do you think your dad has spent over the last X amount of years on purchasing things from these different influencers, whether they be physicians or just nutritionists online or just marketing companies, right? How much
yeah.
money do you think he has spent where that money could have gone towards retirement, vacation? It
It adds
seems
up
like
quick.
oh, not that much, but when we take something like Athletic Greens AG1, that is a monthly subscription that millions of people get, and
Yep.
it's like
It's
$100 a month.
$100 a month. Yep.
So, just think about that over the course of how a lot of these companies are subscription-based, and yeah, that's a lot of money to be spending on something that what if it potentially doesn't even have those benefits, or they're very small benefits, they're not actually the benefits that you would like them to be, they might just have like, a micro amount of those benefits where
Mm-hmm.
you really
Mm-hmm.
need macro amounts to
Yeah.
to make a difference in your health, and this is just kinda where we're at in this era of anybody can be an entrepreneur and start a business and kind of hack how to market to people. And there's a very formulaic way to get your message across. And if you keep up with that formula and how it changes and what people are attracted to, and you stay on top of that, then you're going to be pretty successful and you're going to be able to get people like wrapped around your finger.
Yeah. So I think a great place to start is to look at the playbook.
The playbook.
The playbook. How do these health influencers, how do these different companies, people who are pushing a certain diet, how do they go from, okay, I have this problem to providing this is the only solution? So what's step one?
Step one is to vilify something.
Yeah. Yeah. So you identify a villain, and that villain can be anything from blood glucose to
Carbs are bad.
carbs to vegetables,
Oatmeal, in a specific food group.
right, to meat.
Meat, yep, red
Uh,
meat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many different
So
things
you
you could say.
identify a villain, and this villain is the cause of X, Y, and Z problems.
Mhm.
And, a lot of times there is some reality to that, right? In the case of blood glucose, if you do have a blood glucose spike that stays out of range for long enough, and you have elevated blood glucose for long enough, which requires more insulin, that could potentially lead you towards prediabetes or type 2 diabetes.
Mhm.
So there is a problem with that, but let's say in the case of blood glucose, if you do eat a carb, you're going to get a blood glucose spike. As long as that comes back to baseline within a few hours, that's perfectly normal. That's how your body is supposed to function. But somebody might say, oh, you've got this blood glucose spike. That's a bad thing. You got to go into a keto diet or an anti-inflammation diet or something like that to negate this. So that identifying a villain is partially to make the viewer scared,
Mhm.
but it also gives you something that we all need to fight against. So that's how that kind of
And then the
works.
person is the savior. Like,
Right,
I have
right.
the answer, I'm the
Well, that's
savior.
step 2.
Okay, I'm ahead of myself.
So the second piece of this is if the villain is prominent enough, that means that my diet or my solution has to be even more restrictive to cut it out. So if the villain is whole grains, then I have to cut out all whole grains out of my diet. So that's bread, that's rice, all the different grains, wheat, all of those things I can no longer eat. So by doing that, now the solution becomes even more and more restrictive. So step 2 is to identify the solution. So the solution in the case of cutting out grains is to go onto a paleo diet where you're eating protein, starchy vegetables as your carbohydrate source, and lots of fat. So that's sort of where that comes from. And then in the case of, let's say, if you've identified blood glucose as the villain, then you need to stay away from anything that's going to spike your glucose levels, which would be really any carbs. So you have to go into a keto diet from there. So there's all sorts of ways. But step 2 is to identify a solution, and your solution is the only answer to beat this problem.
Yes. We see this all the time with just this is the diet playbook. It's not just the like online influencer playbook, but
Right,
it's
it's the
every
diet
diet that you
playbook.
see.
Yep.
But now everything's just more centered around being online than going. I used to go to the bookstore and look at the diet books to see.
Right.
And what's also interesting is oftentimes we're going to look to the diet that fits our bias of what we want, what we're more attracted to.
That's why keto is so popular, because people want to be able to eat bacon. They want to eat meat.
And I
right?
think people don't want to have to calorie restrict. And none of those, oftentimes with these diets, there's nothing around caloric restriction or portion sizes.
Right.
So it's like you can eat however much of any of this that you want as long as you cut out X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. And then in reality, though, you are doing some sort of caloric restriction because you are cutting out X, Y, and Z. And that should, like, you can only eat so much meat in a day. You can only eat so much of, these certain foods in a day. So that way you are into a caloric restriction based off of that.
And is there step 3 or is it just step 1 and
Just step 1 and 2.
I feel
Just
like
2
everything has to have
steps.
3 steps. And then the third step is you can't do it.
Right.
You see success. This is my third step, I would say. Or the third phase of this is you try it, you see some short-term success, but it's very limiting and your lifestyle doesn't align with this restriction. And so then you're just back to square one, which is what's the next one that I'm going to try? And that's the whole yo-yo dieting thing that kind of many people fall into, like your dad, who's like, I did this, now I'm on to this. Like, so all the 20 different things your dad has done, like they've like none of them have ever really.
They all work to a degree. I mean, it's not like he's overweight,
but not long term enough for him to stick with
he doesn't
one
stick
way.
with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And why do we think that he doesn't stick with it? Because is it the nuance? He wants the newest, shiniest things. I think that's part of it.
I think that's a big part of it. It's like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the new hot thing
And
that
I think
people
that's
are
like with
talking
everything.
about?
I think about with like fashion trends, right? We're kind of all following this herd of what we're being told is what we need to be doing in order to be successful in our lives in so many ways, whether it's, cargo shorts are out and now short shorts are in, Mackie. By the way, you better be showing those thighs off. Well, all your shorts right up because your thighs are so muscular. But that used to be weird. Like if you saw a guy with short shorts on, you'd be like, oh my God, guy's wearing really short shorts.
I'm old enough to remember when short shorts were cool.
Oh, so they've come back.
The last time.
It came back around. I don't know if I was old enough for that. But I think, a lot of what we're told to want and like and desire, it's so based on the media and how everything's interpreted. Because I would have been like, no, Mackie, you cannot wear those short shorts. It's just inappropriate and weird. You got to wear longer shorts. And now that I'm like seeing it everywhere and it's accepted, I've been like, Mackie, you better be putting on those sexy short shorts. Those are going to look good on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like similar with diets too, because we all want to feel like we're a part of something and that, we're in the tribe. And so if carbs are out, then carbs are out. If carbs are in, then carbs are in. So
Gluten free.
we're all at the mercy of all of these companies profiting off of us and
Yeah.
manipulating us. So how do we actually know what the truth is here? And I think, this goes into we've got to take action for ourselves. We've got to look into things and not just trust things at face value, especially when it comes to online influencers, even if the person it has, doctor in front of their name. Do you know what I mean? Doctors are online, but they're not necessarily an MD, or they don't have a Ph.D. in nutrition, or,
Right.
just because you are a doctor could mean a lot of things. You could be a doctor of physical therapy.
Yeah.
You could be a chiropractor. You could be so many things,
Yeah. Yeah.
that does not mean that you are an expert on nutrition.
Yeah, oftentimes you'll see somebody wearing a lab coat and a stethoscope, but they have a PhD in English. Like it's there's there you it's not even I didn't even make that up.
That's not a
That's
joke.
that's real. But there's a couple of things that you can do. There's two things that I recommend. So the first thing is to look at the research, look at the study. So if somebody mentions a study, look it up. Actually look at what that study said, because they might
Mhm.
be taking the study and twisting the words around to fit their narrative. And there's a whole lot of nuance to looking at studies. Sometimes, there's uh, a lot of studies, especially in the health world, are very small. So that can be an issue where they're not really statistically relevant. Other studies, they're just not necessarily well designed. They didn't try different things well, and you can look at what are they actually testing here, and does it actually fit that narrative of what that person was saying? Oftentimes, you'll see that the study actually says the opposite of what the influencer said.
And that's always weird to me. If they're referencing a study and it says the opposite, so that's a blatant
That's
lie
just a
then.
lie. Yeah.
I don't even understand why you could even reference a study if you're saying, and I have seen this, where it's like,
Well,
did they get it wrong? Or,
I think they're just banking on people not really looking into it. They're just gonna take them for their word.
well, somebody that we do follow that is all about really going into the studies, which is we reference him in the beginning of the podcast, Lane Norton. He mentions this all the time, that he cites all of his studies because
Go look
he
at it.
wants you to look at it. Like,
Yeah.
this is real data that I'm showing you. This
Right,
isn't made
right.
up. I'm not fluffing this up. He said 1% of his million followers are actually clicking on any of the
Of the links.
and I know what you're thinking. Who has time to do any of that?
Right.
But I think it is important, if you're gonna make a change to something, make sure that it is backed by data.
Yeah. If you're trying something out and you're gonna spend resources on that, whether that's time or money or
Mhm,
just even your mental space,
mhm.
make sure that there is something behind it that kind of proves that it actually does what they say it will do.
Yeah, and I think, this was something that you've been talking about a lot, Mackie, but the concepts are few, but the
Yeah.
methods are many. Can you go into that a little bit? The concepts are few, but the methods are many.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you look at certain things, so if you look at weight loss, let's say, there's really one main way to lose weight. It's to be in a caloric deficit. Your body needs to be using more energy per day than you're taking in. So there's a whole lot of variables around that to make it way more complicated than that. But at the very root of it all, take in less calories than you're using.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of ways to get you to that caloric deficit. So maybe you're doing time restricted eating. Maybe you're following a certain diet that, doesn't allow you to take in as many calories. Maybe you're tracking your macros. Maybe you're tracking your calories. Maybe you're cutting out meat. That could allow you to have a little bit more nutrient density, which allows you to eat less calories. So there's all different ways that you can decrease your caloric intake and either maintain or increase your caloric expenditure. And, so in that instance, that is the single concept, but many methods.
Mm-hmm. And I think, this is something I struggled with for a long time, is that I just want the right way. I think a lot of people, they don't want to waste their time. They want the
Right.
right way to do something. And there is no right way. There
Yeah.
isn't, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've been low carb. I've also been high carb. As long as my calories are staying within the range of where they need to be, I'm not going to gain weight. Or I could lose weight if I was in a calorie deficit, doing both an extreme low carb diet or high carb. Maybe, though, I found that one of them suits me better for what I'm doing,
Yeah.
or I like it better. Like, I
Right.
know personally for me, I actually prefer a lower carb diet. I just like eating meat. It fills me up.
Yep.
Eating more protein is more filling for me, and I just feel better. That's something that I determined for myself over the years, right? But now with my goal, I'm eating more of a high carb diet
Mm-hmm.
because that doesn't fit my goals anymore. But when I'm not doing this training, when I'm just doing my normal routine, I will most likely go back to a nutrition plan that I've discovered for myself over the years of trial and error that just is my
Yeah.
easiest to follow. And I
Yeah.
think that's what you're saying. What's the easiest for someone to follow when things are super restrictive? And when I say I'm following a low carb plan, that doesn't mean that I don't eat carbs. So it's not cutting anything out. I eat everything. It's just that I might eat a little more protein than I do grains on my plate. I like to
Right.
have a
Right.
smaller amount of grains and a bigger amount of meat for me
Mm-hmm.
personally. That's
Yep.
what I enjoy. Someone might be the opposite. They want a small amount of meat and a larger amount of grains. There isn't one that's better than the other. And this is really hard for people to wrap their head around because they just want
Just tell
certainty.
me what to eat.
I can't. I mean, I
But
could
that,
seriously, but we can help you discover and give you some kind of basic tools and guidelines of what we have seen work really well for people in different circumstances
yes.
through knowing you a little bit, because you need to know thyself to figure this out, and your schedule, right? Are you somebody that has a certain work schedule where, like, time restricted eating, like you're saying, intermittent fasting might work really well for your work schedule, and it
Right.
doesn't feel like a stress at all. But if something feels really stressful, that's causing more harm
Yeah.
than good. Stress is the thing we want to be worried about more than anything. And, you know, people often talk about cortisol being the reason why they can't lose weight because their cortisol is too high. First of all, do you actually know if your cortisol is out of range? Have you had a test? Do you know if your hormones are out of whack? Have you had a test? Do you know if your thyroid
And even if you
is
have a
slow?
test,
Yeah.
that's just a snapshot in time. That's just that one day.
Yes, but if you're not even working with a medical professional to know if these numbers are out of whack consistently, right? Because like you said, snapshot is just one thing. You kind of have to work with someone over a period of time to know if this is really the cause of why you aren't losing weight. Then we can't just go around telling ourselves these stories
Yeah.
that,
And that's what they are, stories.
yeah, and it's stories because it's a narrative that makes you feel better about why you're not seeing results.
Mm.
And I think we have to start getting real with ourselves, right? People snack more than they want to admit to themselves. They have 2 pretzels here, another 2 pretzels there, a cookie.
Yep.
Throughout the day, they have some of their kids' food. Things like that add up. Or you are in a deficit Monday through Friday, but then Saturday and Sunday, you end up being in a surplus for the week of 1,000 calories. So your deficit is no longer there. I'm not going to lie to people and say that this is easy. This requires discipline and really requires you to focus in on something. When you're
Yeah.
trying to be in a deficit, there's focus that happens. And sometimes that focus can borderline obsession for people and disordered eating. So we have to be mindful and careful depending on who we're speaking with. But there's always there's ways around this.
Yeah. Well, I think you asked earlier, what are the ways that we can find out the truth? And part one of my answer was, you know, looking at the studies. But part two of the answer is to really look at yourself and run the experiment on yourself. Okay, what if I tried this? How does that make me feel? Okay, that didn't really feel great. I don't love that. Let's try this. And you can get to the truth by trying certain things out. Just like I was saying, that there's many ways to go into a caloric deficit. Maybe it's time restricted eating. Maybe that's great for you. But maybe that doesn't work because you work out in the morning and you need to have some fuel for that workout. So there's all different ways to do this, and what works for one person might not work for another, and that's where it takes this really active engagement that you're talking about to look at it, and then not only to try something new and be willing to try on these different things, but if you try one on and it doesn't necessarily work, not to give up and get frustrated and just go back to the way that you were, because doing what you were doing is just going to give you the same results that you got before. And I doubt you would want those results if you were trying something new.
Yeah. This is partially why we are more keen towards food logging than
Yeah.
putting anybody on a specific nutrition plan, because of the ability for people to have flexibility in eating what they want, but taking inventory of how much they're eating, when they're eating, and figuring out what works best for them versus being on a quote unquote diet.
Right. Giving yourself a food log and tracking your food really gives you the ultimate in freedom. To me, it sounds counterintuitive, but the idea that I'm going to track what I'm eating for breakfast and lunch, then you can see what you've got for dinner. Oh, I could actually have that big meal at the restaurant, or I can go have that thing that I really love because I have it in my budget for the day. And I don't have to feel guilty about it. I don't have to worry about it. It's there. It's going to be fine. And I've tracked for that, or I've budgeted for that throughout the day.
And if you go over budget, that's just information.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with the scale. When you see the numbers on the scale, it's ever changing from morning to night, day to day. You wanna look at the overall trends of something like that, not get so caught up in, every little number like, "Oh my god, I weigh,
Yeah.
point 0.1 more than I
Yeah.
did yesterday," that's just it's not helpful, and it's the same thing, "Oh my god, I went 100 calories over today." Okay, but you might have gone 1,000 over if you weren't actually logging
Yeah.
this and understanding this.
Yeah,
So,
and taking away the meaning from the numbers. I have my Garmin that tracks pretty much everything I do. It tracks my heart rate variability, it gives me a sleep score in the morning, it tracks my activity minutes, like, it tracks every step. Everything that I do is tracked on there, but I've been wearing a Garmin for, let's see, 2016 through now, so that's 8 years, where each day's sleep score doesn't really mean much to me. I don't really care if I got a 75 sleep score versus a 90 or something like that. It doesn't really impact how I feel and it doesn't impact my worth, or it doesn't even impact, oh, I think I'm going to be tired today. I'm going to have to take a nap because I had a sleep score of 60. No, it's just by doing something for long enough, that I've taken away the meaning from that. So you don't even have to do it for long to take away the meaning from it. It doesn't really mean anything when you step on the scale and it gives you a number. That number is meaningless, really.
if you do it enough times. If you're doing it very infrequently, then it can still feel like this very, very scary thing.
Sure.
But like what you're saying is you do something enough and it doesn't feel as charged anymore.
Yeah.
Now, we don't necessarily tell everybody to weigh themselves every single day. We do recommend for clients who want to lose weight that they do it once a week at least. So there is there's something that you can track over periods of time. And I just want to go back to this whole concept that still seems to be hard for people to wrap their heads around and believe, which is the calories in, calories out talk. Because there's still is going to be so many influencers out there that talk about the nuances only with the hormones,
Right.
the cortisol, the estrogen, the testosterone, all the little things. They're not so little, but that all the things that could influence why somebody, even in a calorie restriction, isn't seeing weight loss.
Yeah, I
There
mean,
are circumstances for this, but but I would say big picture overall, we still see that most people might think that they're in a deficit, or they're kind of lying to themselves.
yeah.
And they're like, because you're doing so well certain days, it's like, I should be rewarded. And I get
Mhm.
it. We should be rewarded for our hard work, right?
Yeah.
But that nothing is a guarantee in that you're putting in the hard work 70%, but there's this 30% that you're thinking you get a free pass on. It just doesn't work like that.
And I think, and if you're doing 70% great, 30% off the rails, that is worse than doing 80% great, but 20% just more medium. Not completely
Wait, you
into
think
another
that the off the
universe.
rails is better?
Off the rails, no, now it's worse. So
Oh,
like
you
if you're
said it.
doing
I think you said it
70%,
backwards.
yeah, okay. So
Okay.
yeah, what I'm saying is if you're doing, I'd rather somebody be a little bit less perfect on a daily basis,
Mhm. Yes.
but be able to maintain that over time than to be like perfect Monday through Friday and then off the rails on Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, like, I want you to give yourself permission to eat a cookie every day if you wanna budget for that, because that will make it so that you don't feel like I can never have these foods, and then you go nuts, and then you're never seeing progress. Because I see a lot of progress with people who are eating anything they want, you know, in a way. They're fitting it all in, and when I say anything you want, doesn't mean anything you want, every portion of anything you want. It just
Yeah,
means that
right.
you're sprinkling in, you can have your wine, you can have your ice cream, you can have it all if you're putting it into your day and it fits with everything that you're doing. This, for people, just feels almost like they're afraid of if you give them an inch, they're gonna take a full mile, but it's really the opposite. When
Yeah.
you restrict, you oftentimes go overboard.
What's that called? The reverse psychology.
100%. We see it with me.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to eat so much right now. I couldn't even finish my lunch. I was so full.
Yeah.
Now, when I'm on a calorie restriction,
You could have eaten that whole lunch and then
I would
some.
have been like, I need dessert after lunch, right?
Right,
So
right.
a lot of it is how we talk to ourselves, how we perceive things, what we believe. It's so much psychology when it comes to this, and it is not your physiology. I know that we want something to blame it on. We want to blame it on our slow metabolism, but that's just not how it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
That's not the science of
Right.
what's happening.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee if I work with you and we stuck to a calorie deficit together for a week, really did it, you would see your weight go down.
Yeah, and it is a challenge to figure out what that number is. So we have calculations, we can do a whole lot to estimate what is your baseline caloric expenditure in a day. But the reality is that it's very difficult to figure out what is that actual number unless you're doing what's the
Like a resting metabolic,
yeah,
like breathing
unless you're
test.
doing a full test for it. But then on the other side of the equation, it's very difficult to understand how much you're eating in a day.
Oh
'Cause
yeah,
no matter how hard you try, even if you're weighing every single thing that you eat, there's probably some variance in there somewhere. And the nutrition labels could even be wrong.
yeah, exactly. So we do the best that we can with guessing,
Right.
and being precise in certain ways
Yeah.
when we can, like at home. Measuring out a tablespoon of olive oil does go a long way than just like drizzling a
Drizzling
bunch
it
of
all
olive
on.
oil over
Right.
your vegetables,
Right.
right? So, but Mackie's right. None of us know with 100% accuracy how much we're burning. Those are, our heart rate devices and watches are just based on heart rate alone, and I think we've talked about this, but the more fit you become, the lower your heart rate is, the less calories you're even gonna be showing that you're burning, does not mean that you're burning any less calories in your session. In fact, more fit you are burning more calories because you're expending, like, more energy. Like, take a Tour de France athlete,
Right.
per hour, one of those guys is burning 1,100 calories an hour, whereas a deconditioned athlete, could be only burning 600 an hour.
Yeah, because they might be traveling 12 miles in that hour versus somebody who's only going 6.
Exactly. So you see athletes like Michael Phelps eating 8,000 calories in a day to maintain his body weight because that's how many calories the dude needed. So
Yeah.
we don't know for sure, but we can we
We can
do
get into
know
the
with,
ballpark.
yes, with calculations that we get into a ballpark and then we make adjustments from there if that ballpark seems like it's
And
not
that's
working.
and that's what we do with our coaching is we say, "Okay, here's what we did for the week or month or however long that period is, and we need to make this adjustment."
Mhm.
And then we make that adjustment, but it's all based off of data.
It's the same thing with like my running, right? Right now, I have a certain amount of volume, I have a certain amount of intensity that I'm doing, but let's say that I'm not seeing results. Like right now, what I should be seeing is that my heart rate is going down for the effort, right? So if I used to run, let's say, a 10-minute mile and my heart rate was 140, I should be seeing that my heart rate goes to 138, 130, like it's going down. I mean, at a
Yeah.
certain point, it's not going to be that have a resting heart rate at 10-minute mile, but we're looking to see that my running economy is improving, that my resting heart rate is improving, that my VO2 max is increasing, right? If those things aren't happening, then my coach is gonna tweak my plan
Yep.
to change it up, and we don't know until we try things. And this is where people are impatient and
Yeah.
want the quick fixes, and that's why you'll jump from one influencer to the next influencer
Right.
when after 30 days you've done something and, it was too hard to stick to or you didn't see results right away, and that's just not how bodies work. Like, you have to be invested in yourself and invested in with some time and patience.
Yeah. And that's one of the other things that we work with in our coaching is to figure out what is gonna be sustainable for you in the long haul. So our goal is to figure out a way of being, a way of life that will actually be something that you can do forever, as opposed to, oh, I followed this really strict diet for 2 months and I lost all this weight and I feel great, but then the next day it all comes back.
Mhm. I wanna read a quote that you wrote that you put up here, Mackie, because I really liked it when you were sharing it with me earlier. As to the methods, there may be a million and then some, but principles are few. The man or woman who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods, ignoring principles, is sure to have trouble.
Right. So if you're jumping from method to method, diet to diet, workout to workout, you're in for trouble because you don't understand the mechanisms behind it that are driving the actual change.
Yeah, for years, I just thought doing more fitness would make me fitter.
Right.
And I was not getting a return on my investment of effort
Because
and
you're just
time.
training a singular energy system.
Now that I'm doing easy days, hard days, I have a
Strength training
variety.
days.
Yep. My fitness is improving so much, taking way more recovery than I've ever taken before, full
Yeah.
days of doing nothing. It's incredible to see how things have changed over the years.
One of the things that quote reminds me of is, and the reason why it says man is because it was like the 1920s. So we did update it for
Should I
modern
have read it
times.
in 1920s accent
No,
then?
please
Okay.
don't. But one of the things that reminds me of is the A to Z weight loss study. So they tested 4 different diets. They tried the Atkins diet, which is low to no carb. They tried a very super high carb, low fat diet, the zone diet, and then something kind of in between. So they tried 4 different diets and they saw the Atkins diet actually got the best results, but they're all pretty much even. But the most surprising thing that they found in the study was that it didn't matter if they were doing the Atkins diet, the low carb versus the low fat versus the more moderate ones in the middle. they actually found that the adherence to the diet was a much better indicator of success than the diet itself. So as long as people stuck with the diet and were able to do the diet, they were able to see weight loss results. So that turned out to be the really important factor there. So when you were looking at yourself and trying to figure out what's going to work best for you, it almost doesn't matter what you pick, just as long as it fits with your lifestyle, it fits with your preferences.
Yeah, and I think that goes for a lot of things like exercise too, right? If
Yeah.
you don't like working out at a gym, you're not gonna go to the gym. Maybe you like a class, so you're better off going to some sort of fitness class.
Yeah.
If you don't like to run, but you like to bike, then don't run. Don't try to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
something
Don't
that you
force
don't
yourself to
like.
run if you hate running.
Yeah, because you're just not going to stick with something and then you're not going to see cardiovascular improvements over time because we can get to different things similarly.
Yeah.
You can have amazing cardio with biking or running
Yeah.
or an elliptical, whatever feels better for you.
We know that there are ways to optimize your training, whether it's doing certain types of training and maybe you're focusing on strength training versus cardio, or all different ways to look at it and to optimize what's best for you. But really, the most important thing is to go from 0 to 1, just finding something that works. So as long as you're doing some kind of movement relatively consistently, that actually is the best indicator of longevity and lifespan.
Yeah, and I think we talk to clients all the time with different goals. And I have many clients that start with me and their goal really is just to be healthy
Yeah.
and fit and maybe and lose some weight or build a little bit of muscle. Then we have clients who are saying, I have a marathon in 4 months from now. That is going to look very different than the client who just
Right.
wants to be healthy and fit. And you do not have to have a really hyper specific goal. Like if your goal is just to be as healthy as your body can be and to feel good, that's a great goal. It can be
Yeah.
more broad like that.
To go back to our point of the concepts are few, the methods are many. There's only a few concepts. So if your goal is to be healthy and maybe lose a little bit of weight and feel good, there's not a whole lot of things you need to do. It's very, very basic things. So consistent movement, getting good sleep, managing your stress, and eating good food. Those are the 4 things that you need to do to live that healthy lifestyle. So,
It's really easy to
yeah.
overcomplicate that. If you want to keep
Yeah.
overcomplicating that, keep watching all these fitness and nutrition influencers telling you to do these very hyper specific things.
One of the things that Layton Norton says is he talks about greats, the best of the best. Kobe Bryant, when he played basketball, he just focused on the fundamentals. He didn't have some weird training method that really hyper focused on these really minute details. He was the first one in the gym. So it really is mastering these basics and staying consistent with the basics over time.
Yeah, the best of the best just do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And you have to be patient and you can't expect some instantaneous reward. I'm sure Kobe Bryant didn't expect after 1 year of doing his training or whatever that he would amount to something. It's just trusting in the process that it's like you're putting into your retirement fund.
Mhm.
Trust that over time, that money will grow.
Yeah, shooting these free throws in my junior year of high school and getting really good at this and while I'm in high school is literally adding to his retirement account.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there's one question that a lot of people ask that I wanted to clear up, and that is that if they are working out too much and not eating enough, if that is what's preventing them from seeing fat loss, weight loss, body composition changes.
Yeah,
Does
so
the calorie deficit not does it get is it void with this circumstance of
right.
someone who's working out a lot and not and they are in a deficit?
So it is true, your body does. So if you're in a caloric deficit, which is what your goal is with working out, if you're exercising, if you're doing some sort of movement practice, one of the things that you're doing there is you're actively burning calories. Oftentimes we use exercise as a way to get into caloric deficit. Is one way to get to a caloric deficit. Another way to get to a caloric deficit is by taking in less energy in your food. But either way, and maybe you're doing both of those things, but either way, you're ending up in a caloric deficit. So when you are in a caloric deficit for any amount of time, over time, your body is going to get more efficient. So when it is seeing that you're using more calories than you're taking in, it thinks from an evolutionary standpoint that you're going into a famine. So if we're going into a famine and times are going to be lean and we're going to be struggling to find food, we need to slow things down. We need to conserve. We need to go on a budget. We need to make sure that we're going to have enough to get through this period. So the body will slow down and will burn less calories over that period of time. But the question is, how much does it really slow down? And are you able to overcome that if your goal is weight loss?
That's my question to you. That is the question that the listeners
So
want to know.
it's a great question, and
There's
that's
different theories
where
on this.
there's different theories on this, and looking at what type of exercise you're doing can change things. So I find personally, and this is very individualized for different people, but I find personally that if I'm doing a lot of cardio, I'm gonna get hungrier and I'm gonna eat more. Like my body's gonna want more calories throughout the day. Versus if I'm doing strength training and then I come home and have a whole bunch of protein, I get less hungry in that circumstance, even though I might be in that same caloric deficit.
Yeah, I think if you think about bodybuilders, they're working out like crazy. And
Yeah.
they are the kings and queens of being in a deficit because they have to get their body weight and their body fat down as low as they possibly can for competition. And they do it.
Yeah.
So great example of someone who's working out more and eating less and seeing results.
Yeah.
So I think the idea that you're not eating enough, your metabolism is so slow, you have something called low energy availability where your metabolic rate's going down. This is case by case with different athletes. This can happen. There's something called RED-S, relative energy deficiency syndrome, which happens to athletes where their body isn't getting enough nourishment for the amount of exercise that they're doing. Typically, those athletes you'll see can be underweight. They then are prone to more stress fractures and things. But it can happen to people who have higher body fat and who are technically, from a BMI perspective, overweight. This is where we are not all the same. We do have different bodies and genetic predispositions to what your body's supposed to be. Some of us could have this and still be in a larger body. And it's going to go back to kind of experimentation and take inventory of what you're actually eating, be on top of it. Don't just guess. Guessing is not going to be helpful in this scenario. You just saying that you're not eating enough and you're working out too much and that's why your metabolism is slowing, or a nutritionist just kind of saying that to you without really getting your food logs and really seeing and you being honest with your food logs. It's not going to be perfect. You're going to guess. But unless you have the data and some of your facts straight, we don't really know if that is what's causing you to not see results.
And another thing I want to bring up about being in a caloric deficit is that when you are in a caloric deficit and you're losing weight, you cannot control where that weight comes from. In the ideal world, I'd be like, okay, just burn the fat right now, which a lot of people try to do by doing a lot of like low effort intensities. But the reality is that you can't control where that weight is going to be lost. So you're not only going to lose fat, you're also going to lose muscle.
Yeah, we see this in the case of all of the weight loss drugs. People losing weight very rapidly, but they're losing lots of muscle mass along with body fat.
And it's no different in the caloric deficit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why with bodybuilders, they're so obsessed with eating high protein because they're trying to save as much muscle as they possibly can while they're cutting.
So that's the second piece of it is if you are in a caloric deficit and you feel like, oh, my metabolic rate is going down, if you have more muscle, that can negate that effect.
That's why strength training is a really powerful piece to weight loss.
Yep.
If you're trying to lose weight, we recommend not just doing it through cardio, but definitely adding in strength training as like one of the most key elements to sustaining weight loss and having your weight loss come more from body fat and not from muscle. One last thing that we wanted to bring up in this conversation is being in a calorie deficit is something that is not meant to be done for long periods of time. Again, like Mackie was saying, your body is very efficient. It kind of catches on. It doesn't want to lose weight. It sees that it's always in a scarcity mentality. And you as well don't want to feel like you are in a calorie deficit for a long period of time. This is why it should be done for a few months, then you can go to maintenance. And then if you need to lose weight, you can do it again. But I think that's important to have some ebbs and flows when you're doing your calorie restriction if you are looking to lose weight. And as an example, let's say you want to lose 10 pounds and we know that we can safely lose about a pound per week for most people. That's 10 weeks. And some people have been trying to lose those 10 pounds for over 10 years.
Right.
And that's just a great illustration to say, if you just wanted to really focus in on this for 10 weeks and work on this and just spend just less than 3 months doing this, then you can go to maintenance after and maintain that weight loss forever. If you figure out what works best for you in the methods, as we've been talking about, and what method is going to help you, sometimes talking to one of us can be useful to have accountability and have someone to kind of troubleshoot with on what those methods could be. We're probably going to sway you in the direction of just eating all things and seeing if we can do it that way, because we just know that that has a lot of long-term success versus doing some sort of time restricted eating or cutting out carbs. We don't necessarily subscribe to any of those
Our goal is to
plans.
find things that don't feel hard.
Exactly. And a lot of those
It
things
might be hard
typically,
in the beginning just to get an understanding of
yeah.
it, but once you get to that point and you
Mhm.
start to get into the flow of things, it shouldn't feel really hard.
Exactly. And then again, food freedom is really important. So knowing that you can have all things and that nothing's off the table is very liberating for many people. But just think about that. Dedicating 10 weeks or 20 weeks, if half a pound a week is very doable and very harmless, of cutting out a couple hundred calories a day, one little snack, one little portion of peanut butter. I mean, it goes a long way to get you to that point. But it again would be you being hyper focused for a few months. And then if you have a lot more weight to lose, then cycling can be really, really nice, where you're a month or two of calorie deficit. Then we spend a week being in maintenance and just giving your body a break from being in
And your
deficit,
brain a
and your
break. Take a
brain,
break.
right? Then you go back versus all or nothing approaches where people try to just like strong arm it for,
Yeah,
for a really
yeah.
long time. And
I
then that
know
doesn't work.
for me personally, if I know that there's some sort of end in sight, whether it's a 5-minute interval or a 12-week training cycle or a 12-week thing that I'm doing with my food, that's a lot easier than thinking, okay, this is something I have to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I know we spent a lot of time talking about being in a calorie deficit and weight loss, and we know that that isn't everybody's goal, but I think it's a very hot topic, and it's a lot of what these diets are predicated on. Many people are trying to find the right way to lose weight and look a certain way. So I wanted to dedicate this episode to talking about that a little bit more and going back to like what's real, what's the actual science. And it's not cutting something out specifically. It's not hacking your blood sugar. It really is about the energy you take in and the energy you put out, and finding that balance for yourself and figuring out what method is going to feel the least restrictive and that you can stick to. And on that note, that is what we want to leave you guys with, which is just don't take everything at face value. Don't even take everything we say at face value. We are always trying to adapt what we're sharing and learning and researching. And we have people that we look to as our mentors and experts that are above us in their education. Mackie and I do not have a PhD in nutritional science, right?
Yeah.
I'm a board certified nutritionist, very different than somebody who has a PhD in nutrition, right?
We read the research
Yeah.
versus people who are actually doing the research, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so just because you like somebody's tune, you like somebody's abs, you like somebody's outfit, is not a great reason to subscribe to everything that they're saying and thinking that whatever they do, if you do, you're going to have the same outcome. You're on your own path, you're on your own journey, and I want you to really take action and take accountability for yourself and responsibility for what you're doing, rather than leaving it in these quote unquote experts' hands.
Yeah, love that.
All right.
So if you are watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what you would like to hear about in the future, or if you have any comments on anything we talked about today, leave us a comment. If you're on Spotify, there's a place that you can ask some questions. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review.
Yes.
5
And
stars.
if you want to work with Mackie and I, if you're looking to get some coaching and get a plan together, our Ultra Life app has everything you need on it. We provide you with your custom workouts from your cardio to your strength training, and we coach you on your nutrition and have one-on-one calls with you monthly. And we also offer on a very limited basis, depending on if we have spots available, one-on-one personal training over Zoom. And we can do those as one-offs too if somebody wants to work on a certain lift or form or wants to just tighten things up in the gym. That's what we're here for. So you can go to our Instagram at Juliet Root or at Mackie Root and reach out to us there, because right now our website's under construction.
You can still go to it, ultralife.co. You can enter your email to get onto the Longevity Lab mailing list.
But if they want to set up a call with us,